West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
A big hearing is taking place before Judge Eileen Cannon today in the Mar-a-Lago document case where Donald Trump has been charged with the willful retention of national defense information, and he, along with his co-defendants, Waltine Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, were charged with obstruction of justice. Donald Trump and Special Counsel Jack Smith are at this hearing to discuss the trial date, which is currently scheduled for May 20th of 2024, and both Special Counsel Jack Smith and Donald Trump are requesting different trial dates than the one that is currently set, which we've been telling you here was never a realistic trial date. Special Counsel Jack Smith is requesting a new trial date of July 8th, 2024. Donald Trump and his co-defendant Carlos de Oliveira are saying that there shouldn't be any trial date in 2024 and that it would be unfair given his run for the office of the presidency for the MAGA Republican Party. But Donald Trump and Carlos de Oliveira say if the court is inclined to set a trial date to select August 12th of 2024, and Waltine Nauta, the co-defendant, the other co-defendant of Donald Trump's, is requesting a separate trial of September 9th, 2024. Hard to imagine there that the court's going to sever Waltine Nauta from the other co-defendants. That would seem to be entirely inefficient. Let's take a look at Special Counsel Jack Smith's filing. I want to take a look at Donald Trump's filing. And Donald Trump also, even though he said it, he's saying this August 12th, 2024 date. I want to be very clear. He spends most of his filing saying that there should not be any trial date in 2024, and then also references the Supreme Court's granting of certiorari on his argument of absolute presidential immunity in the Washington, D.C. federal criminal case, because like the D.C. criminal case, in the Florida criminal case against Donald Trump before Judge Eileen Cannon, Donald Trump is also making an assertion of absolute presidential immunity in connection with a motion to dismiss. So Donald Trump saying that Judge Eileen Cannon should take guidance from what the Supreme Court is doing in slowing down the Washington, D.C. federal criminal case. Wait to see what the Supreme Court does there to inform her on her decision-making with respect to Donald Trump's motion to dismiss the criminal indictment in Florida. And to be clear, what Donald Trump's argument is, and this is not disputed, this is not my spin of it, Trump is saying that under the Presidential Records Act, while he was in office, he claims that not only were the classified documents listed in the indictment essentially declassified, but they also belonged to him, and that he declared nuclear secrets, war plans, and other really sensitive national defense information and other classified information He declared that this is personal, it belongs to him and not the government, and by telepathically declassifying and declaring it personal, and that he claims that he has the absolute right to do that, and he did that while he was in office. He claims that can't be questioned. So according to Trump, anyone who's the President Biden, for example, now could go and claim any nuclear record as his and not belonging to we the people, and then claim there's actually a doctrine of absolute presidential immunity, which then would prevent any criminal case being brought against somebody in office for making that designation as personal and having the intent to take it. I mean, it's such a dangerous dictatorial argument that should just be rejected immediately. But sadly, elections have consequences, and Trump put 3 Supreme Court justices on that bench. You combine that with other 3 right-wing Supreme Court justices, and they're running the show. They're taking away reproductive rights. They're taking away the separation of church and state. They're taking away common sense gun protections. They are gutting Voting Rights Act. They're gutting Civil Rights Acts. This is the modern day MAGA Republican Supreme Court as a result of Hillary Clinton not prevailing and Donald Trump winning in 2016 and appointing 3 justices and MAGA Republicans, dating back to Mitch McConnell, who MAGA Republicans now hate, and they call him a Democrat and say that Mitch McConnell is the Democrat from Ukraine. That's how MAGA Republicans refer to Mitch McConnell. That's how unhinged it is. He prevented Barack Obama, former President Obama, from appointing justices. Okay, so here's the order. Here's the proposed order from Jack Smith. Attached to this pleading is the government's proposed schedule for going forward, culminating in a new trial date of July 8th, 2024. A feature the government has built into its schedule is monthly status conferences. This will permit the court to ensure the parties are meeting their deadlines the court sets. The schedule does not yet set a date for filings by the parties in support of their positions on the draft jury questionnaire, or a date for the clerk's office to mail the questionnaires. The court will be in a better position to assess the timing of the former after reviewing the parties' joint filing from February 28th. The court can then set briefing on the questionnaire concurrently with one of the briefing schedules in the government's attachments. That's signed by Special Counsel Jack Smith. You take a look at defendants' proposed schedule. This is Trump's, Carlos de Oliveira, and Waltine Nauta. And what Trump says here in his filing is that he claims that given his status as the presumptive Republican nominee, he claims that any trial this year would be inappropriate and would also violate the Justice Manual, which applies to the Special Counsel's office, which prohibits actions that may have an impact on an election. This action was filed a long time ago. The fact that Judge Eileen Cannon did not set this trial in a speedy way. Let's be clear, this case was filed well within the time frame it was permitted to be filed in, and let's face it too, this is an important case for the very essence of, are we a country that values the rule of law? Are we a country of law and order, or are we a country of dictators? And it is sickening that our Supreme Court's even considering this question. It takes 4 Supreme Court justices, by the way, to grant certiorari. So you have 3 that Trump appointed. You just needed 1 other for them to grant certiorari on the issue of absolute presidential immunity. Let me explain to you why that is important in a moment. Trump says, while he thinks there should not be any trial in 2024, he goes on to say that Trump respects the court issued an order directing the parties to submit scheduling proposals through recently filed motions to compel disclosures and to dismiss the indictment. Trump seeks to timely vindicate important rights through these proceedings, including his motions to dismiss pursuant to the Presidential Records Act and presidential immunity. That's what I just kind of described earlier in this video. Then Trump cites what the Supreme Court just did and said, in addition, yesterday's order by the Supreme Court agreeing to review the D.C. Circuit's erroneous decision in the United States v. Trump was an important step toward the protection of the U.S. Constitution and the fair system of justice that Trump seeks in this district and elsewhere. The justice's anticipated ruling will provide guidance as Your Honor evaluates Trump's motion to dismiss based on presidential immunity. So what Trump's saying is, wait to watch what the Supreme Court does. That should inform your ruling. So it is a bit of a ruse, to be clear. You may have heard people say, well, Trump's asking for this date on August 12th for trial. What's going on with that? It's a ruse. He's picking a date that he knows will never happen. He's picking that date there as well, knowing that if you stick it in August, even if there's some potential for the Washington, D.C. case to be set, that this case on August 12th before Judge Cannon would be there as a way to try to block other cases. Also, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis was requesting that the Georgia case take place in August. So what Trump's really doing here is, knowing that this case will never go to trial in August, allowing Judge Eileen Cannon to set a date to try to block the other trial dates in that August period, create this ruse that trial would, that he's okay with trial on August 12th, but then also saying throughout this, what should be a very basic proposed schedule, you saw how simple special counsel Jack Smith is, Trump basically whining and saying it's unfair to go to trial in 2024, but if we must go to trial, let's do it in August, but he goes, but there's so many buts here. But let's wait till what the Supreme Court does. And also, Trump's filed so many frivolous motions to dismiss. There's no way, in my view, that Judge Eileen Cannon's going to be able to make rulings on any of those in the next 30 to 60 days, based on the fact that it takes her forever to make rulings on very basic SEPA-type motions. Trump says that he respectfully submits these following dates for consideration, and when you look at the dates, he lists various primaries as claiming that there are conflicts there, and then he puts August 12th for his trial date, and then Walty Nauta September 9th, 2024. You know, and I'll say this though, what would be interesting to me is if Judge Eileen Cannon ultimately denies Donald Trump's absolute immunity argument, which is an absurd argument to make, and then the 11th Circuit steps in. I think the 11th Circuit may find that it doesn't even have jurisdiction to hear an interlocutory appeal, unlike what the D.C. Circuit didn't do. The D.C. Circuit found it had jurisdiction, issued a powerful 50-plus page ruling, only for the Supreme Court to take its time and not make any meaningful ruling, and then setting certiorari or granting certiorari and setting the oral argument for April 22nd, which is just so utterly absurd. So while those dates are technically being proposed by Jack Smith and Donald Trump, my own view, I don't see the Florida case happening in 2024. I don't see the D.C. case happening in 2024. I don't see the Georgia case happening in 2024. The Manhattan District Attorney case is going March 25th, 2024. That will go. And then so by May, the question is, Donald Trump can be, based on the Manhattan District Attorney criminal case, a convicted felon in that case, and be $500 million or have $500 million against him in judgments. Remember, he hasn't been able to come up with the money to post bond. And these civil cases, give credit to E. Jean Carroll and her lawyers for the $83.3 million verdict, and before that, the $5 million verdict. Give credit to New York Attorney General Letitia James for holding Donald Trump accountable for nearly $500 million in a verdict there in the civil fraud case before Justice Arthur Engoron, where the appellate division rejected Donald Trump's attempt to stay enforcement there.
It is Friday, the 1st of March of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious the little Yorkie is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes, we are indeed. So, how are you on this fabulous Friday? It's fabulous for many reasons. I don't know. I can't really list any other than the fact that we moved from February to March on a leap day from a leap year. And now we're going into the slide into the Ides of March. Oh, yeah. But they've come a little early here on the West Coast. I'll get into weather in much more depth later on in the show. But we are under a winter advisory, a storm advisory, and experiencing a snowy mix at the moment. Just a few hundred feet higher than where the mothership resides. There's quite a bit of snow. And we could be getting snow piling up. They're expecting over an inch here at the mothership. And much more at just a few hundred feet above us. And then in elevations above that, it's copious amounts to the point that authorities are saying not to travel in it. And not very far from here, in the Cascades and the Sierras, authorities are saying don't even go out of your domicile. It's that dangerous. I think because of temperatures and amounts of snow. Just a reminder that the science of climate change is a hoax, and everything we are experiencing now is just, the weather, I guess. Okay, well, we know where that went, and just like the Russian hoax, the only hoax was calling it a hoax. Of course, we knew that. Okay, so we're going to try to get through today, and let's see. Oh, a little bit of a update on the personal. Mom goes in for a pre-op workup on Tuesday with the anesthesiologist and I think another member of the surgical team. And then on Thursday, that's when she has the procedure to have the stent put in her carotid artery. And, it's still scary. It's my mom. And she's rather delicate. Her skin is gossamer thin. It doesn't take much to tear it. So I'm just hoping that, things go well. And, these this surgical team, they know what they're doing. It's quite amazing, the technology that has allowed us to be able to get a stent in a carotid artery or a heart itself. And that's something to marvel at, except we are living under the aegis of a anti-science, know-nothing movement. I like to call them MAGA Nazis for short, who believe that they know more than all of us, and measles epidemics be damned. So what? Everybody should get measles. That way you'll have resistance the next time you get measles. Oh, thanks. We used to go when I was in late high school, through college, when I was in college in Southern California. We would take auto trips because gas was so cheap then. You could just drive like forever and anywhere. It was so fun. But we used to take auto trips through the interior of California, through the Big Valley, and we would happen upon old graveyards in these tiny, tiny little farming towns. And about sometimes half or more would be filled up with the gravestones of little kids who happened to have died during the 1918 flu pandemic. They called it the Spanish flu because, they were racist. Didn't come from Spain, but, that's when it was first reported. It came, I'm trying to remember, did it come from Germany? But it came into Spain, and, Spanish people. And you would see child gravestones in abundance, not in a good way, up to about the 1950s and 1960s, and then you didn't see, these massive amounts of children dying. And why was that? Well, that was when people started vaccinating their kids against child illnesses and diseases that killed them for millennia. But now we're living under the aegis of a know-nothing, MAGA Christo-fascist Nazi party who are telling us, let's kill him. And yet, the idea of an angel baby, a blastocyst, is actual life. And they put more effort into their moral structure for a clump of cells. Now, that's not to, denigrate a clump of cells, great. But once that clump of cells forms and then is born, they want to starve it. So the angel baby, the idea, is much more important than the actual being. People who think like that, we used to commit them. Okay. A psychopath. Now we have a whole party of psychopaths. So I guess since that's the normal, if you have empathy and you actually care for another human being, you're the outlier. You're the murderous tyrant. Well, you care about living children. We care about this blastocyst over here. How dare you say that this clump of cells doesn't have the same rights as everybody else? Well, if it had the same rights, you would starve that blastocyst, wouldn't you? Can a blastocyst have an abortion? Oh, yeah, if it was a female one, they're made for babies. Let them carry their rapist baby to term. All right. That's how fucking weird it is. Excuse my French. So, I could go on, and I usually do, but now we are going to go ahead and give you the rundown on what we have in store for you here as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Well, starting off up top, Special Counsel Jack Smith and Trump present their dueling trial date submissions on the Mar-a-Lago document case before Judge Eileen Cannon today. And we already know how that is going to go. Okay, especially with, the MAGA Supreme Court issuing their decision. You think they're going to hear a case? They already know how they've decided on it. Please. On the rest of the menu, a man who sought to spark a race war, not Charles Manson this time, pled guilty to firebombing a Costa Mesa, California Planned Parenthood clinic. A Montana judge declared 3 laws passed in 2021 that restricted abortion are unconstitutional, and the Justice Department says Mississippi police unconstitutionally jailed people for unpaid fines. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the editor of the top independent Russian newspaper was detained and later fined for discrediting the military. And the Biden administration will investigate Chinese-made smart cars that can gather sensitive information about Americans driving them. Well, it's not just the Chinese, but hey, all that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, that really does help us put a big dent in our bills if you're able to send those funds to us once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. And it is true. A few folks have been doing so for many, many years, and it has really helped us pay those ISP bills and all the others, too. It's not a small matter to run this powerhouse of resistance, and we have you to thank for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, etc., you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. And I have been mentioning that we all take care of Facebook. It just happens to be when we post things and share it with Facebook, we all kind of take care of Facebook. But thank you, Tom, for everything that you do as well. Follow me on all those social media platforms and even, Instagram, Tumblr, And I can be found at Justice Putnam in most of those cases. Otherwise, it is simply just Justice Putnam. Anyway, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And that way you have quick access, if you're following my social media feeds, to those show notes and links diaries, because I have the links to those show notes and links diaries in my social media feed. So there. And that way you can read the actual reportage by the actual reporters. If you would like to follow the show, such as it is on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. And most importantly, if you could pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, even Audible, that would be grand. So please do pick up those podcasts. Alrighty. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Los Angeles Times by Brittany Maia. The final defendant tied to the firebombing of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Costa Mesa pleaded guilty yesterday, Thursday, for his role in that crime and for another plot to damage Orange County's power grid. Tibbet Ergel, age 22, pleaded guilty to federal charges of conspiracy to damage an energy facility and intentional damage to a reproductive health services facility. He was one of 3 suspects arrested in connection with the 2022 attack on the clinic. Ergel's co-defendant, Xavier Batten, of Brooksville, Florida, across the state lines, by the way, and Chance Brannon of San Juan Capistrano also pleaded guilty in recent months. Ergel had been slated to go to trial this month, March. Prosecutors are seeking a sentence range of 5 to just over 6 years in prison. Ergel's attorney did not respond to a request for comment. Martin Estrada, U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, said the Justice Department is very focused on this and making sure that we investigate these cases and prosecute them aggressively. There really has been a rise throughout the country in terms of what I'll call domestic extremism, but might otherwise be called groups motivated by hate and ideology. According to the plea agreement, on the morning of March 13th, 2022, Ergel and Brannon, disguised in dark clothing, hoods, masks, and gloves, ignited a Molotov cocktail and threw it at the clinic's entrance. The men targeted the clinic because it provided reproductive health services and they, quote, wanted to make a statement against abortion, scare pregnant women away from obtaining abortions, deter doctors, staff, and employees from the clinic from providing abortions, intimidate and interfere with the patients of the clinic, and encourage others to engage in similar acts of protest, the agreement states. In other words, they were terrorists. The facility was forced to temporarily close, and staff had to reschedule around 30 appointments. Following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, Urgel and Brannon planned to use a second Molotov cocktail to damage another Planned Parenthood clinic, but did not follow through with it after seeing law enforcement near their intended target. Urgel then conspired with others, including Brannon, to use firearms or a Molotov cocktail to damage a Southern California Edison electrical substation. In March of 2023, the statement states, Urgel messaged an associate to say that he had found a substation to target in the city of Orange with a fence area nearby enough to a switch. He sent Brannon aerial photos and suggested going to the location at 3 a.m. to do a drive-through and either climbing on the roof of a nearby building or throwing the Molotov cocktail across the fence to reach a, quote, critical portion of the substation. Urgel even wrote Brannon a letter, the agreement states, in which he said, "The rifle is in a box in my room waiting to be used in the upcoming race war. Voting doesn't change anything. If it did, it would be illegal." He added that he had an unbelievable desire to murder journalists and politicians as soon as some chaotic event begins. I wonder where we got that idea. Throughout the summer of 2023, Urgel and Brannon also researched how to attack the parking lot or electrical room of Dodger Stadium on a night celebrating LGBTQ pride, including by using a remote detonated device, the plea agreement states. He and Brannon, then an active duty Marine, were arrested 2 days before the Pride night at the stadium. This group was plotting attacks all over Southern California, the U.S. Attorney said. Shaylee Rager of NPR brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. 3 Montana laws restricting abortion rights, including a ban on abortions after 20 weeks, have been struck down in court as unconstitutional. District Court Judge Kurt Kruger wrote in his ruling that the regulations attempt to impose severe burdens on abortion access without clear justification or credible evidence. The laws passed by the Montana legislature in 2021 would have banned abortion at 20 weeks, barred doctors from prescribing medication abortions via telehealth services, required a 24-hour waiting period for medication abortions, and would have required doctors to offer an ultrasound before an abortion. The laws had been blocked by a preliminary injunction that was granted in October of 2021. Under the court's ruling, the laws cannot be enforced. Kruger's decision referenced a Montana Supreme Court precedent from 1999, finding the state's constitutional right to privacy protects access to pre-viability abortion. The state's high court reaffirmed that precedent in a ruling last spring. A spokesperson for AG of Montana, Austin Knutson, said the state plans to appeal the ruling to the Montana Supreme Court, saying he's committed to protecting the health and safety of women and unborn babies, but nobody living. Republicans in the state legislature continue to push for restrictions on abortion access. Alexis McGill Johnson, president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, called the Thursday ruling a critical victory, Several more anti-abortion rights laws are facing court challenges in Montana, including half a dozen from the 2023 legislative session. All anti-abortion rights restrictions, except for one requiring parental notification for patients 15 years old or younger, have been blocked in court while those lawsuits play out. Goldberg of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Mississippi Police Department in one of the nation's poorest counties unconstitutionally jailed people for unpaid fines without first assessing whether they could afford to pay them, the U.S. Department of Justice said yesterday, Thursday. The announcement comes amid a Justice Department probe into civil rights violations by police in Lexington, Mississippi. The ongoing investigation, which began in November, is focused on accusations of systemic police abuses in the majority black city of about 1,600 people, some 65 miles north of the capital of Jackson. In a letter addressed to Catherine Barrett Riley, the attorney for the city of Lexington, federal prosecutors said the Lexington Police Department imprisons people for outstanding fines without determining whether the person has the means to pay them, a practice that violates the 14th Amendment. Riley did not immediately respond to a phone message yesterday, Thursday. Prosecutors said the conduct of police in Lexington violates the Constitution's prohibition on wealth-based detention. It does so by requiring people who are arrested to pay outstanding fines before they can be released from jail, and by issuing and arresting people on warrants for outstanding fines. All right, well, it looks like about 86% of Lexington's population is black and a poverty rate approaching 30%, so why not put it on the backs of the poor, especially if they're black? All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Food as Life. If awards were given to the best-looking portrayal of food in movies, then Anh Hung Tran's The Taste of Things would be a shoo-in. The meals in this movie, which are as central to the plot as the performances of the leads, are presented in such a way that you might wish that Smell-O-Vision had gotten off the ground. Either that or wish for an app that would allow you to purchase the meals that are being shown on screen. As the opening shots make clear, the food presented here is a metaphor for life, or specifically, the two lives at the heart of this film. Set in late 19th century France, the movie tells the tale of Eugenie, a talented cook played by Juliette Binoche, and Dodin, Benoit Magimel, a gourmet. While Dodin may have started out as the boss, by the time the film takes place, which is 20 years after Dodin hired Eugenie, the pair's relationship has shifted to the point that they are a team. Indeed, the pair have grown close enough to eventually become lovers, but the main love and passion the pair share is, and clearly always has been, food. The gastronomic alchemy they create is incredible, while the chemistry between Binoche and Majumel, who were former partners in real life, is terrific. The Taste of Things is a beautifully shot and expertly directed grown-up love story in the sense that it not only portrays two leads who are over 40, but it also shows the importance of compatibility and shared interest in most successful long-term love stories. Also, it begs the question, what good is food unless you have someone special with whom to share it? The Taste of Things is a lovely gem of a movie which, much like the food it presents, should be savored and enjoyed. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to this edition of PCD Soundbites. I'm Karen Ngowe, filling in for your host, Latoya Simmons. Current guidelines recommend adults get at least 2.5 hours of moderate-intensity aerobic activity a week, like brisk walking. But many Americans don't get enough physical activity to meet this guideline, which can lead to chronic disease and premature death. Joining me today is Dr. Susan Carlson, a lead epidemiologist in CDC's Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity. We'll be discussing her research, which aims to estimate the percentage of U.S. deaths attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Thank you for being here, Susan.
Thank you for inviting me, Karen.
Susan, give us a brief overview of your study.
As Karen stated, the current aerobic physical activity guideline recommends that adults participate weekly in at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, or its equivalent for substantial health benefits. The health benefits include such things as lowering the risk of premature death, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancers, and depression. In our study, we first examined what influence physical activity levels below the current guideline have on premature mortality, and we wanted to look at whether this association differed by age. The second purpose was really to estimate the percentage of deaths that are attributable to levels of physical activity that are inadequate to meet the current guideline.
What did your research reveal about the association between inadequate physical activity and premature death among American adults?
So in a nationally representative sample of U.S. adults, we found that adults with levels of physical activity inadequate to meet current guidelines had an increased risk of premature death. Overall, we found that 8.3% of deaths were attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Our findings suggest that if you increase adults' physical activity levels to meet the current guidelines, this is likely one way to reduce the risk of premature death in the United States.
What did you find when you looked at this association in different age groups?
We did not find a significant association between physical activity level and mortality in adults aged 25 to 39. However, for those aged 40 to 69 and 70 or older, we found that not meeting the guideline was associated with an increased risk of premature mortality.
How did these findings compare to previous similar studies?
We found that our estimates were similar or slightly lower when comparing to similar studies that have examined this association. In general, our estimates of the percent of deaths attributable to inadequate levels of physical activity is not practically different from other studies.
Do you think researchers have become better at estimating the percentage of deaths attributed to inadequate physical activity?
Estimating the percentage can be challenging. Many of the previous studies that have provided these estimates have done so by combining estimates across different sources. This can really bias results, especially if there are differences in the populations or if the physical activity measure differs. When you use a survival analysis conducted in a single population, which is what we did in this study, you can overcome a lot of these biases and improve your estimates. Facilitating the linking of CDC survey data from systems like the National Health Interview Survey to mortality data can really help researchers explore these issues.
How do you think this research can be used to help get adults moving and reduce the risk of premature death associated with inadequate physical activity?
So we found in this study that a significant portion of deaths were attributed to lower levels of physical activity. By estimating the public health burden of low levels of physical activity, this can be important for setting research and program priorities and for public health planning at the national, state, and local level. Ultimately, individuals make the decision to be active. However, this decision can be made easier by programs and policies that provide opportunities for physical activity and by making communities more activity-friendly. By working collaboratively across different sectors, communities across the nation can help to increase physical activity levels and potentially reduce the risk of premature death.
Thank you, Susan. You can read her study, Percentage of Deaths Associated with Inadequate Physical Activity in the United States, online at cdc.gov/PCD. The findings and conclusions in this report are those of the author and do not necessarily represent the official position of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. Last year, we followed the exodus of 9 states from the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC, driven by baseless conspiracy theories. The states which left are finding it hard and expensive to replace ERIC's expertise. At least one state wants back in. ERIC, then a 31-state cooperative founded in 2012, finds duplicate, deceased, and moving voters. In 2022, conservative conspiracy theorists claimed ERIC was controlled by liberal billionaire George Soros. Election deniers pressured election officials and legislators in Alabama, Florida, Iowa, Louisiana, Missouri, Ohio, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia, who caved and pulled out of ERIC. Then came the hangover. Great reporting by the Center for Public Integrity and VoteBeat shows states buying more expensive data services, creating their own, or entering into agreements with nearby states. Texas created its own system, which VoteBeat reported costs as much as ERIC, but exchanges less data with fewer states. Virginia paid a private company which rented outside data lists. Some states agreed to exchange data, but VoteBeat reporting suggests the lists are cleaned less often. Ballotpedia reports that the Virginia legislature is considering returning the state to the ERIC cooperative, while California and Hawaii are considering joining. We have links to more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day Hoover Dam was formally turned over to the federal government. It was a massive undertaking. Approved by the Coolidge administration in 1928, work began to divert and then dam the Colorado River in 1931, creating Lake Mead. Thousands of unemployed flocked to the area in search of jobs. More than 21,000 were employed over the course of 5 years, with as many as 5,200 working on any given day. Workers were paid on average of 50 cents an hour, with higher pay for skilled work. Governmental hiring terms included preference to veterans and no hiring of Asians. The Colored Citizens Labor and Protective Association of Las Vegas protested de facto hiring discrimination against blacks. Their eventual representation among the employed totaled an estimated 24 to 30 for the duration of the project. A few Native Americans were hired as high scalers to remove loose rock with jackhammers and dynamite. Estimated fatalities ranged from 96 to over 150. Many died from falls, heat-related illnesses, falling debris, heavy equipment, and carbon monoxide poisoning from tunnel work. The project was rocked by at least 2 documented strikes. The industrial workers of the world attempted to organize there. Workers struck over wage cuts and working conditions. They repeatedly demanded flushing toilets and cold, clean running water, especially in temperatures as high as 120 degrees in the summertime. At the time the Hoover Dam was turned over to the federal government, it was the tallest dam and the largest hydroelectric station in the country. It currently generates about 4 billion kilowatt hours of hydroelectric power for Nevada, Arizona, and California. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Under snowy conditions at the moment. Looks like we'll have highs later on in the mid-40s, and we'll have a snowy mix with throughout the morning, and then it'll change to rain later on in the afternoon. Winds out of the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Looking like we're going to get 1/3 of an inch of rain, and that's after over an inch of snow. Tonight will be in the upper 20s, low 30s with cloudy conditions with rain and snow in the evening, becoming all snow overnight. I should add it is piling up quite a bit outside the mothership at the moment. Winds tonight will be out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we're expecting about 2 inches of snow overnight. And then tomorrow, Saturday, highs will be in the low 40s later on in the day. Rain and snow showers in the morning, changing to mainly rain showers later in the afternoon. Winds light and variable. And it looks like snow accumulations will be around an inch. And then looking about 1/4 of an inch of rain for Saturday. And then more snow on Sunday. And looks like pollen is still rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 31 parts per million. And that daytime UV index has ticked up into the moderate range to level 4. Barometric pressure is holding steady at the moment at 29.63 inches. Visibility is at about 1 mile, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 48 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 52 degrees and cloudy with an advisory for heavy rain and possible flooding. Rome is 54 and mostly cloudy with a wind advisory. Bagram is 33 degrees with snow. Hong Kong is 48 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 48 and mostly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 62 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy with a wind advisory and a small craft advisory because of that wind advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 42 degrees and fair, and New York, New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, Brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Stop at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The editor-in-chief of the renowned Russian independent newspaper Novaya Gazeta was detained in Moscow yesterday, Thursday, and later fined after being accused of discrediting Russia's armed forces. Sergei Sokolov was detained by officers from Russia's Center for Combating Extremism and fined about $329 U.S. in a hearing at a Moscow court later on in the day. And let's see, it said the charges, which are administrative and are usually punishable by a fine or a short prison sentence, are related to material posted on the outlet's Telegram channel. It was found in an examination by the authorities to contain, quote, linguistic and psychological signs of verbally discrediting the actions of power structures, the paper said. The media watchdog Reporters Without Borders said on Twitter that it protests against this arrest, which further testifies to the violence of censorship in Russia. Sokolov took the leadership of Novaya Gazeta's newsroom in September of 2023 after the previous longtime editor-in-chief, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dmitry Muratov, was named a foreign agent by Russian authorities. In September of 2022, a Moscow court revoked the license of the paper, which has been critical of the Kremlin for years as part of the authorities' continuing crackdown on dissent. Days after, Vladimir Putin sent troops into Ukraine just over 2 years ago, the Kremlin-controlled parliament approved legislation that outlawed disparagement of the Russian military or the spread of, quote, false information, end quote, about the country's invasion of Ukraine.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Matthew Daly of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Citing potential national security risks, the Biden administration says it will investigate Chinese-made smart cars that can gather sensitive information about Americans driving them. The probe could lead to new regulations aimed at preventing China from using sophisticated technology in electric vehicles and other so-called connected vehicles to track drivers and their personal information. Okay, try all the insurance companies too. And how about Tesla? Officials are concerned that features such as driver assistance technology could be used to effectively spy on Americans. Like I said, it's not just the Chinese, but they're bad enough. While the action stops short of a ban on Chinese imports, Joe Biden, he's our president, you know, said he is taking unprecedented steps to safeguard America's data. The probe is the latest action by the Biden administration to guard against what officials see as the growing threat of Chinese cyber attacks. Biden signed an executive order this week aimed at better protecting Americans' personal data, such as health and finance records, from foreign adversaries like China and Russia. Biden and other officials noted that China has imposed wide-ranging restrictions on American autos and other foreign vehicles. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said the connected cars are like smartphones on wheels and pose a serious national security risk. Data collection is not the only concern, she and other officials said. Connected vehicles can also be remotely enabled or manipulated by bad actors. Imagine if there were thousands or hundreds of thousands of Chinese connected vehicles on American roads that could be immediately and simultaneously disabled by somebody in Beijing, Raimondo said. So it's scary to contemplate the cyber risks and the espionage risks that these pose. Under the plan announced yesterday, Thursday, the Commerce Department is issuing notice of a proposed rulemaking that will launch an investigation into security risks posed by connected vehicles from China and other countries considered hostile to the United States. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.